"You've been riding our coattails your whole life," my brother said, loud enough for the whole table to hear. "Honestly? You should be grateful we still let you sit here." My mother laughed. Not a nervous laugh. A real one. I was 31 years old, sitting in the dining room of the house I'd helped renovate after my father lost his job at the plant. The ceiling fan I'd paid to have installed turned slowly overhead. The wine on the table. I'd brought it. My name doesn't matter as much as what happened next. I set down my fork. I didn't say anything. My brother mistook my silence for defeat, the way he always had. He wasn't wrong to assume that. It had always worked before. I grew up in a mid-sized city in Ontario, the kind of place where everyone knows your parents and your parents know everyone's business. I was the eldest. My brother was 4 years younger, louder, and from the time he was about 15, completely and totally untouchable in our family's eyes. He got a car at 17. I got a part-time job. He dropped out of college twice. I finished my accounting degree while working 30 hours a week at a grocery store. Nobody said anything about either of those things out loud. But the pattern was clear enough. After I graduated and got a real job, the requests started slowly. Could I cover the hydro bill this month? Dad's contract got pushed back. Just until things settled. Of course I said yes. I was the responsible one. That was supposed to be a compliment. Things never really settled. They just got absorbed into a new normal where I was the absorbent. Over 6 years, I transferred money for my brother's rent in 3 different apartments, 2 of which he shared with people I never met. I co-signed a car loan for him when he was 24 because he had no credit history, and my parents looked at me over the dinner table with that specific expression, hopeful, expectant, slightly guilty, that I had never once been able to say no to. I paid for my mother's dental work when her insurance lapsed. I fronted 2 months of my parents' mortgage when my father had a health scare and couldn't work. I paid it back to myself slowly, in the form of not going on a single trip for 4 years, not replacing my car when the transmission died, not doing anything that felt like it was only for me. None of this was ever acknowledged as sacrifice. It was just what I did. It was expected the way weather is expected. My brother called it being the smart one in the family. He said it like it was a burden I should feel lucky to carry. That night at dinner, something shifted. I don't know exactly what caused it. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was the way my mother laughed, easily, without hesitation, when my brother made his comment about me riding coattails. Maybe it was that I'd had a hard week at work, and I was tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. Whatever it was, something inside me went very, very quiet. Not numb. Quiet. There's a difference. Quiet is when you can finally hear yourself think. I stayed for the rest of the meal. I helped clear the table. I hugged my mother at the door and drove home on the 401 with the radio off. And I thought about every transfer I'd ever approved. I thought about the car loan still sitting on my credit bureau. I thought about the cosigner agreement I'd never actually read carefully because I trusted my parents when they said it was just a formality. It wasn't just a formality. By the time I got home, I had already decided that things were going to change. I just didn't know yet how far the change would go. I want to be clear about something. I did not go home that night and immediately blow everything up. That's not how I operate. I'm an accountant. I think in systems. I think in second and third order consequences. I was not going to flip a table and walk out and feel good about it for 2 days before realizing I'd created a legal mess I couldn't undo. So instead, I made a list. I listed every financial obligation that had my name attached to it in relation to my family. The co-signed car loan, a joint account I'd opened with my mother years ago to make it easier to send her money, which she had started using as something closer to a general household account. A credit card I'd added my brother to as a secondary cardholder when he was in a temporary bind 3 years ago and had somehow never removed him from. Then I called my bank. Then I called a lawyer. I used my employee assistance program benefit. which covered a free 30-minute consultation. The lawyer explained what I could and couldn't do unilaterally. Removing my brother from the credit card, yes, I could do that immediately. The joint account, I could close my access and trigger a division of remaining funds, but I'd need to give notice. The car loan, that was the complicated one. I was listed as cosigner, which in Ontario meant I was equally liable for the remaining balance. The only way off that loan was if my brother refinanced under his own name, and to do that, he'd need to qualify independently, which, given his credit history, was unlikely, or if the loan was paid out in full. I sat with that for a week. I didn't do anything dramatic. I went to work. I ate lunch at my desk. I processed payroll for a mid-sized logistics company, and I did not call my mother back when she phoned on Thursday to chat. She left a voicemail. Just checking in, honey. Your brother's been stressed. Call me when you get a chance. I noticed she didn't ask how I was doing. I noticed that, and I filed it away. The following Monday, I started making moves. I removed my brother as a secondary cardholder. The bank confirmed it by email that afternoon. I drafted a letter to close the joint account, gave the required notice, and directed the remaining balance to be transferred to my personal account. I wrote a message to my brother, not a call, a message, because I needed it in writing, explaining that due to changes in my personal finances, I would no longer be able to contribute to household costs or act as a financial guarantor going forward. I kept it short. I kept it factual. I did not apologize. Then I waited. The call came on a Wednesday. My brother, not my parents. He was calm at first, which surprised me. Hey, I got your message. Okay, I said. What does that actually mean? Like, for the car? You'll need to refinance in your own name or pay off the balance. There was a pause. I can't do that right now. I understand, but I can't stay on the loan indefinitely. You've had 3 years. The calm evaporated. He started talking faster, listing reasons, listing grievances. I had always been difficult. I had always made everything about money. Did I know how hard things had been for him? Did I even care? I let him talk. There's a point in those conversations where the other person runs out of fuel and goes silent, and when he hit that point, I said, I'm not asking you to agree with me. I'm letting you know where things stand. He hung up. My mother called an hour later. She didn't ask questions. She told me I was being selfish, that family didn't work this way, that she hadn't raised me to turn my back on people who loved me. I thought about pointing out that I had been the one supporting those people for 6 years. I thought about saying a lot of things. Instead, I said, I'll talk to you soon, Mom. And I ended the call. What happened over the next month was not dramatic in the way I think they expected. There were no big confrontations. There was no screaming. My brother didn't show up at my apartment building. What happened instead was quieter and, in some ways, more painful. The family group chat went silent for 2 weeks. Then my aunt posted something, a birthday message for my cousin, and everyone responded as if everything was normal. But I noticed I wasn't tagged in the follow-up plans. I noticed the family dinner the following Sunday was arranged in a side thread that didn't include me. I only found out because my cousin accidentally texted me the address, then immediately followed it with, sorry, wrong person. So, they were still gathering. They just weren't inviting me. I went anyway, not to the dinner. I want to be clear about that. I didn't crash anything. But 2 days later, my mother called and informed me that she'd spoken to the family and they had some concerns about my behavior, and would I be available to come for a meal on Saturday where everyone could talk. I should have said no. I know that. But I said yes, because some part of me still wanted to believe that talk meant something. It did not mean what I hoped. When I arrived on Saturday, it was not a meal. It was a tribunal. My parents, my brother, my father's sister, and her husband, all seated around the living room like they'd arranged the furniture for it. Someone had brought a tray of Tim Hortons. The formality of that, the trays, the chairs pulled into a rough circle, was somehow the detail that hit hardest. My father spoke first. He said I had disrupted the stability of the family, that what I was doing with the accounts and the loan situation was creating unnecessary stress, that I needed to think about what it meant to be part of a family, and whether I was willing to do that. I looked around the room. My aunt was nodding. My brother was on his phone. I asked if I could say something. My father said, of course. I said, over the last 6 years, I've contributed approximately $42,000 to this family in transfers, co-signed debt, and covered expenses. I have documentation for all of it. I'm not saying this as an accusation. I'm saying it because no one in this room seems to know what happened, and I think it matters. The room went very still. My brother looked up from his phone. That's not, my mother started. I'm not asking for it back, I said. I want to be clear about that. But I'm also not able to keep going the way things have been. And I don't think I should have to justify that. My father said I was being dramatic. My aunt said money shouldn't come between family. My brother said the number I'd cited was exaggerated. I had the bank statements on my phone. I showed them to no one, because it wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about saying it out loud once to people who had been pretending not to see it. I picked up my jacket and I left. My mother followed me to the front door and grabbed my arm. You're going to regret this, she said. I looked at her for a long moment. I regret more than you know already, I said. I'm just done adding to it. I drove home and I ordered Thai food and I watched a documentary about national parks and I slept for 9 hours straight. The car loan was the last thread. It took 4 more months. My brother, faced with the reality that I was not going to maintain the status quo, eventually went to a credit union and got a secured loan using money he borrowed from my father, which, I later found out, my father had taken from their RRSP. I found out because my mother told me, in a voice designed to make me feel guilty. I didn't feel guilty. I felt sad for them, genuinely. Taking money out of retirement savings to patch a problem that didn't need to exist was a painful consequence of choices they had made, not choices I had made. But I understood by then that they would not see it that way, and I stopped trying to make them. When the refinancing cleared and my name came off the loan, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and I read the confirmation email 3 times. It was a Tuesday morning in February, gray outside the way February in Ontario always is, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief so deep it felt like grief. Because the truth is, when you spend a long time holding something up, you forget what it felt like not to. You forget that your back is tired. You forget that you've been braced against something the whole time, and when it finally lifts, the absence is so total that you don't know what to do with your hands. I took a week off work. I booked a solo trip to Portugal. I had thought about doing that trip for 6 years and kept not doing it for reasons that, looked at clearly, were not really my reasons. Before I left, my brother texted me, not an apology, a question. Are you actually leaving the country? For 2 weeks, I replied. He didn't respond. My mother called the night before I flew out. She asked if I'd been in touch with my brother about his situation. I told her I hadn't and didn't plan to. She sighed and said she was worried about him. I told her I was glad she was there for him. She didn't know what to do with that. I landed in Lisbon on a Thursday morning and took the train to my hotel and ate dinner alone at a restaurant where the tables were too small and the wine was good, and no one wanted anything from me. I sat there for 2 hours. I ordered dessert. I watched the street. Somewhere between the first glass and the second, I thought about the dining room at my parents' house. The ceiling fan I paid for. Turning. My brother's voice, carrying across the table like he owned every room he walked into. I thought about the version of me who would have sat there and taken it and driven home and wired money 2 days later because the guilt had nowhere else to go. I felt very far from her. When I got back to Toronto, a coworker asked how my trip was. I said it was the best 2 weeks I'd had in years. She asked where I'd gone and I told her, and she said she'd always wanted to go, and I said she should. Later that month, I ran into my brother at a grocery store in our neighborhood. We both reached for yogurt at the same moment and stood there for a second, awkward in that specific way that only happens with family. He looked different, more tired, less performed. "Hey," he said. "Hey," I said. We stood there a beat too long. "How was Portugal?" he asked. "Really good." He nodded, put the yogurt in his basket. "I didn't know it was that much," he said quietly. "What do you put in?" I looked at him. I believed him. That was the thing. He genuinely hadn't counted, hadn't thought to count. In his version of events, I had always just been there, like a utility, something that worked until it didn't, and you never really thought about the infrastructure until the power went out. "I know," I said. He nodded again, looked at the shelf. I don't know how to." "You don't have to," I said. "I'm not waiting for anything." I meant it. I wasn't angry, standing there between the dairy case and the granola bars. I wasn't performing forgiveness either. I was just someone who had finished a very long chapter and was standing in a grocery store on a Saturday afternoon. I put the yogurt in my basket and moved on to the next aisle. That's the thing they don't tell you about finally stopping. It's not a dramatic break. It's not a scene. It's much quieter than that, and in some ways, that's harder. Because there's no catharsis to point to. No single moment you can replay and feel good about. There's just the slow accumulation of normal days, each one a little more yours than the last. My parents and I talk occasionally now, holidays mostly. There's a politeness to it that didn't exist before, which is its own kind of progress. My father has not once mentioned the money. My mother has not once said thank you, but she stopped calling me to report on my brother's latest difficulty, which in our family is as close to an acknowledgement as anything gets. My brother and I text sometimes, rarely, neutrally. There's a distance there that may never close, and I've made peace with the fact that I can't want closure more than the other person is willing to work for it. My credit score, for the first time in 3 years, reflects only my own choices. My savings account looks like something I built, not something I borrowed from myself. I booked another trip. This time, Iceland. I wanted to go since I was 23 and I kept not going, kept finding reasons, kept having somewhere else the money needed to be. This time, there was nowhere else it needed to be. I wasn't useless to them. I was, actually, the most useful thing they had. And somewhere in the middle of all that usefulness, I had quietly disappeared. I'm done disappearing.